Good afternoon, everyone. It is just 1 o'clock. We will give it another couple of moments as people are clicking in and joining the webinar. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. For folks who don't know me, I'm Allison Kretzinger. I'm our Chief Public Affairs Officer here at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I'm joined by my colleagues, Brianne Boggs, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, and Julie Watts, our Deputy Director for Government Affairs, to share with you a summary of our submissions for consideration as the governor builds towards the 2026 legislative session. Little bit of today's format. I'm going to do an overview and some context setting, and then turn it over to Brianne and Julie to walk through the meat and potatoes, or the content, the reason you're all here, of our decision packages and agency request legislation. For folks who are new to this or haven't used Zoom in a while, there is a question and answer function, or a Q&A function on your screen. Please feel free to type questions there. We will answer them as we go. Either we'll respond with a typed message. Some I may ask and respond to verbally, or I may defer to Brianne and Julie to answer them. We'll review questions as we go. Some we may hold till the end. Some we may take up in the context of a decision package or piece of legislation that we are talking about. So with that, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So for folks who have joined us before, this is familiar. The intention here is just to be able to show a summary of the timeline and the interaction between state agency land, spoiler alert, we're one of those, Gov's office and the Office of Financial Management, as well as the legislature, as we work to and through and post each legislative cycle. We're in that phase of the fall. We have just submitted our requests, our decision packages, and agency request legislation proposals to the governor's office for consideration, and they are contemplating those as they march towards their governor budget build. That gets released sometime in December, typically later part of December, and then the legislature comes to town the second Monday of January. This session is a short session. It is just a mere 60 days at a sprint pace, and it is really intended to be a supplemental session. It is a supplemental session intended to be sort of modifications, brief, etc. That'll conclude in March. Governor's office and governor will then make choices, sign bills, sign a budget, and then the agency will pivot towards implementation as well as planning for the next legislative session. These ongoing continuous cycles of implementation and planning. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. I think it's important to ground us all in a little bit of the principles that guide DCYF as we build towards each legislative set of asks. I won't read them to you, but generally, and especially true this year with some of the context I'll talk about in a moment, really prioritizing and focused on core responsibilities of the agency, those resources and policy changes necessary to support our mission, our legal obligations, really about how do we support kids and families, and then also ensuring our staff have the tools and resources they need. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Context this year. Context this year is interesting. There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of components that influence the realities in the context. It's a supplemental year. So as I described, we are in a supplemental legislative session this year. It's short. It's intended to be short. It's not the year for new idea and lots of spend and reform, if you will. It's a 60-day session. It moves very, very fast. And it's really intended to be the tweaks to the biennial budget, which was passed this last session, and we're all in the throes of implementing. The state economic realities continue to change and be different than we've all experienced the last few years. We continue to see a decline in revenue as well as caseloads grow and state spending outpace that. And so that's a reality that the governor and the legislature, and by extension all of us, are going to have to grapple with. We also know there's a new administration at the federal level, which has created a different dynamic. We are currently in a federal government shutdown. DCYF is open for business. We've sent out communication on that, but We're in a current government shutdown. There's a new proposed federal budget that's going to be moving forward that makes some changes to a variety of programs that will impact folks in our state. And so that uncertainty, that funding reality at the federal level also impacts the sort of realities and choices we're going to have to make as a state, the governor, the legislature, all of us collectively. We also have a new governor and a new administration, and this is his first opportunity to build a budget. I can't imagine it's easy. As Secretary Sen wrote in her letter when she submitted our asks, we all wish circumstances were better. Being a new secretary, being a new governor in this economic reality is definitely not I think what anyone would hope for or sign up for, and it certainly is a challenge that we're all going to grapple with. But we're working through that with our the new administration and our colleagues at OFM and the governor's office, and that just plays into the reality. So all of that combined really means we have a limited scope. This will be the first year, I think, in my tenure at DCYF, that we have more agency request legislation than I think than ever before. We have a smaller number of decision packages, and of those, the asks are smaller within them. We as an agency need to be good stewards and responsible to the environment we're operating in, and so you see that in what we're going to put forward. So a little bit about the format today. I will be here to help run the technology, answer questions. Really going to turn it over to Brianne and Julie now to walk through our decision packages, our agency request legislation. They'll sort of bounce back and forth. Brianne will talk more about our DPs. Julie will talk more about our agency request legislation. Again, please use the Q&A function in the chat to ask questions as we go through, and we'll do our best to respond to all of them. So I think with that, I turn it over to Brianne to start with our child welfare workload battle.
Hi, everybody. So this first decision package, child welfare workload model, is coming after a couple years of our team working on a workload study. So with the passage of new state laws, federal guidance on practice changes, and recent state Supreme Court decisions, the workload on our frontline child welfare workers has increased significantly in recent years. Our team completed a workload study, and they did a deep dive into how much time it takes our workers to complete their tasks, and also how much time do they have available to do this work. This workload study will be reported to the legislature in the next few months. This decision packages is aligned with the results of that study. The DP is informed by this study and requests the first phase and additional staffing for child protective services, family assessment response, social workers, and central intake workers, as well as family voluntary services and the clerical support for these additional workers. The total request is $5 million in the 23-25 biennium and requests to hire 41 new staff by the end of June of 2027. This proposal recognizes that the workload study is projecting a need for 426 new child welfare staff. However, this is phased in over a 10-year period due to the economic realities that Allison talked about on the previous slide. Next slide, please. So this is our critical incident response request. This is in response to a concerning increase in critical incidents, which are child fatalities and near fatalities related to child abuse and neglect when a family has had an open child welfare case within the 12 months leading up to the incident. Between 2021 and 24, the number of critical incidents increased from 28 to 49 cases. This is a very concerning trend for our high-need families in Washington. To address this, DCYF is requesting funding for prevention services in 5 high-need communities. These six services are aimed at engaging families in substance use disorder treatment before a case is closed, improving parent-child attachment and infant and maternal health by connecting families to contracted public health nurses, increasing access to the evidence-based parent-child assistance program, which provides intensive case management and support services to pregnant and parenting women who have substance use disorders. Also increasing the community-based supports for families after a case is closed through a plan of safe care support for families with substance-exposed newborns. We're also working to create a No Wrong Door Family Resource Center, which would provide information, needs assessments, make referrals, and provide direct services to families with high needs. We're also planning to train providers and combined in-home, our provider workforce and our combined in-home services providers in substance use disorder to improve our client experience there, and modernize our child welfare safety framework through a pilot called the Safety Assessment and Family Evaluation Practice Model in 2 communities. The total request is $4 million, and this is mostly for contracted services, but also requests to hire 2.4 FTE by the end of the fiscal year in 27. Next slide, please. So this next request is tied to a workload increase and also meeting state and federal requirements to provide qualified expert witness testimony in more child welfare cases and earlier in the process. This is in response to recent Supreme Court decisions on when the Indian Child Welfare Act and Washington Indian Child Welfare Act protections apply to people involved in child welfare. A qualified expert witness is someone who is designated by a tribe and who should have knowledge of social and cultural standards of the child's tribe to assist the court in determining if custody determinations will result in serious emotional or physical damage to the child. The total request is $5.7 million in the 23-25 biennium, mostly for contracted QEW services, and request to hire 3 staff starting in April of 2026 to support the needs of this program. Next slide, please. This is a funding request to meet legal obligations under federal civil rights laws for individuals with disabilities. In August of 2024, the Federal Department of Justice and Federal Department of Health and Human Services notified the Child Welfare Program that it was not in compliance with civil rights laws that guarantee individuals with disabilities full and equal opportunity to benefit from child welfare services, such as family reunification. To address these concerns, DCYF entered into a voluntary resolution agreement with DOJ and HHS to avoid further civil rights actions and to correct these actions. As a result, DCYF is requesting funding for settlement payouts for the 7 families involved in the VRA and staffing sufficient to provide 1 regional disability liaison per our 6 regions, a program manager over the regions, and also quality assurance and continuous quality improvement specialists to ensure performance in this area. The total request is $1.5 million in the 23-25 biennium, mostly for settlement payouts and the staffing costs. Next slide, please. Oh, and we're transitioning on to Julie Watts to talk about agency request legislation.
Great. Thank you so much, Brianne. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about some of our proposals related to agency request legislation. As Allison mentioned before, usually we have 1 or 2 pieces of agency request legislation that we might be moving forward. This year, we actually have 6 pieces of agency request legislation that we're proposing, and it relates, 4 of them relate to our juvenile rehabilitation system. So I'm going to talk about a few of those. One is the proposed legislation is to create basically a clearer process for complaint resolution in juvenile rehabilitation. So we have a similar process in child welfare, and this legislation would give us the authority to use DCYF's Constituent Relations Division to receive and to process complaints. We don't have that statutory authority currently in JR, and we feel like this would better align our agency process across divisions and just create a clearer process and a better experience for people when they do make a complaint. So this proposal for agency request legislation does not have a cost associated with it, as do most of the pieces of agency request legislation the department is proposing this session. Next slide, please. So we also have request legislation to reduce barriers to employment for people who have prior justice system involvement. So currently, people with prior convictions are automatically disqualified for both employment and volunteer opportunities with the department. At the same time, we know that often people with prior justice system involvement are able to provide mentorship and to serve as role models for incarcerated youth. We know that when people have served their time and changed their lives, they can be a powerful voice to inspire youth in juvenile rehabilitation to do the same. So we have request legislation on this. Rather than have an automatic disqualification system, this legislation would allow us to structure a review process so that we could consider individuals' suitability for employment or volunteer opportunities on a case-by-case basis. It's not a blanket policy to allow people to be hired or volunteer. It's really about making sure that the department can take each individual into account and their individual circumstances, and then make a determination if they're suitable to hire or participate in volunteer opportunities in JR. This proposal will also reduce some financial barriers and delays for processing background checks by removing some fees for out-of-state background check requests. And this proposal also has no cost associated with it. Next slide, please. Protection of body scanner images. So DCYF has recently implemented the use of body scanners in our JR facilities. And we feel that for the privacy of these youth, we really need to have a public records exemption from these images being disclosed. So this is similar to the Department of Corrections and what detention centers have. And we are asking for some statutory authority similar to that. And this would exempt those images from public disclosure and to protect the privacy for these youth. And this proposal also has no cost. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the placement options for that we're seeking. We're seeking agency request legislation on. As many people know, we have an overcrowding situation in our JR institutions. We continue to have serious problems with overcrowding in Green Hill in particular. Green Hill is where a significant portion of the JR population is concentrated because of the age of these youth, because of the types of sentences that they have, and many of these youth do not qualify for other placement options. Green Hill has, over the last year and a half, been operating over what is a safe operational capacity. That is having an impact on programming. It is having an impact on the educational experiences and the treatment and visitation and safety for these residents. We do not expect the proposal that we're submitting this year to fully address our population crisis. So I want to manage expectations there. For that, we know we would need some broader system reform, and that is not what we are requesting with this proposal. Our ask is focused on the safety and the experience of young people in the system. So this request legislation would give us the authority to define what represents safe capacity levels at each of JR secure facilities, and it would afford us with some options for what we can do when we're over capacity. This proposal would also remove some barriers to community placement for individuals who have otherwise demonstrated their likelihood of being successful in such placements, and it would provide some additional resources for community placements. This would also allow us to reduce reliance on placement in secure facilities when it's appropriate, so that we can ease the pressure on those settings, particularly for young people whose time is extended due to a transition from their local jurisdiction to JR. And finally, it would give us some statutory authority to respond to conditions of overcrowding so that we can maintain safety on campus and promote a safe rehabilitative environment when our population numbers do exceed safe capacity. So we are submitting this along with a decision package request for $1.9 million that goes along with this, with implementing this bill. And next slide, please. And I will turn it back over to Brianne to talk about the JR staffing model decision package.
Thanks, Julie. So this next decision package, you just heard Julie kind of set the scene for juvenile rehabilitation and overcrowding issues, and this DP is going to tie to that. So there are critical needs that we have, and critical staffing needs that we have in order to meet the needs of our complex young people who have acute behavioral and mental health needs that enter our JR facilities at Green Hill School and Echo Glen Children's Center. This DP reflects an updated staffing model that is intended to address the rehabilitative needs of young people in DCYF's care. The major components of this DP include increasing the number of JR officers to provide adequate staffing levels at Green Hill School, and also improve the staffing ratios with additional staff at Echo Glen during the graveyard shifts. Removing the JR counselors from the custody model will occur because we'll have sufficient JR officers to cover the floor model, and this will allow those counselors to provide counseling and case management rather than covering officer duties. The total request is for 69 officers hired by June of 2026 at Green Hill School and 16 JR officers at Echo Glen Children's Center to increase the staffing on the graveyard shift, as well as indirect staffing. This is a total request of $12 million in 23-25 in the 23-25 biennium, and 102 full-time equivalents by the end of June of 2027. Next slide, please. Continuing with the theme of overcrowding and specialized needs for young people at JR, this is the JR Parkland request. So additional capacity is needed for young people who are entering JR placements to address both overcrowding and specialized treatment. This next request is to purchase and operate a smaller 16-bed residential treatment facility focused on young people with high acute mental needs, and will help increase JR's continuum of care to provide less restrictive facilities for young people. The major components of this DP include a $3 million capital budget request to purchase the Parkland facility, and then $4.9 million and 24.3 staff to provide the programming and equipment for this medium security housing unit that is estimated to open by April of 2027, depending on the timing of the facility purchase and completion of the security improvements. Next slide, please. Legislative changes have required additional reporting, oversight, and accountability measures, more than our existing automated client tracking system can accommodate without manual workarounds. The ACT system is responsible for all assessment and operational documentation within JR, including resident tracking and classification, sentences and records management, documenting and tracking incidents that occur, reentry and transitions planning, as well as records retention. The aging system cannot handle cannot support the coordinated care needs of young people in our JR facilities. Additionally, there's a need for secure communication systems for young people to allow them to access their families, legal counsel, and remotely delivered services. So this DP includes a two-part ask for both of these needs. The first part is to upgrade the ACT system, including project planning and a feasibility study to replace the system, but also staffing to support the development capacity and timely maintenance and enhancements to the current platform so that we can be more responsive to the needs of young people, but also to our reporting and legislative reporting. It also includes the purchase of secure communications devices and the infrastructure to support these devices in each facility. This is a total ask of $5.7 million and 11.4 FTE starting in July of 2026. Next DP, please. So we're moving on to early learning. This first ask relates to our Working Connections childcare program. So in fiscal year 25, which we just ended in July of 25, the Workings Connections childcare program expenditures exceeded the amount of available funding, and this was due to caseload growth. So more families accessing services than were estimated by the Caseload Forecast Council. In order to close the DCYF books, we had to spend some federal funding to do that. And so what this is saying is we're requesting the backfill of those federal dollars so that going into this next fiscal year, we have sufficient funding to support the continued growth in this area. This is a total request of 9.3 million with no staffing component. Next slide, please. Also related to Working Connections childcare and their caseload, this is a request at both maintenance level and policy level tied to the implementation of Senate Bill 5752, which made quite a few changes to the program and had some assumptions tied to the implementation of some savings that cannot be achieved in the timing when it was estimated. So this is additional funding to comply with 12-month authorization changes that were made in that bill, and also changing that estimate based on when we can implement changes in our IT system, which is called Barcode. The maintenance level request is a one-time ask for 32 million, which assumes the savings start in July of 26 rather than July of 2025. And the policy level ask ties to our IT system changes in Barcode and shifts the savings to March of 28 versus July of 26. There's a lot happening in our barcode space, and we expect that that number will probably adjust once we have better information on when we can implement those changes. Next slide, please. So in our program support program, we have a request for litigation staffing. So over the last several years, DCYF has experienced an unprecedented increase in the number of civil tort claims due to recent changes in state law and also state Supreme Court decisions. In the last fiscal year 25, 1,454 tort claims were filed compared to only 252 claims 2 years ago. This request is tied to the workload associated with managing this volume of tort claims. We're asking for 25 FTE to gather and process records, provide claim management support, and perform witness coordination, as well as contracted resources to make sure that we're compliant with timelines for legal discovery and disclosure. The total request is 6.4 million over the biennium with 25 FTE. And now we're transitioning back to Julie.
Okay, thank you. So two more bills to talk to you about that we are proposing. One of them relates to technical fixes in our child welfare licensing division. So currently, we have for a number of years, just had a series of things that we have wanted to do in terms of cleaning up our statutes related to licensing. So there are multiple components in this bill. One of them is to allow kinship caregivers in placements who are receiving placement of children from another state through the Interstate Compact on the placement of children to be eligible for our child-specific licenses. So that will make it easier for these kinship caregivers to be able to get a license in Washington. It also removes bloodborne pathogens training, which we don't feel is necessary for every person who's receiving, every kinship caregiver who is receiving placement of a child. And so it would remove that requirement in statute for kinship caregivers to need to have bloodborne pathogen training. It would also clean up a part of the statute that creates confusion with regard to whether or not licensed physicians and lawyers are exempt from child welfare licensing requirements. Further, this would allow DCYF to be able to close inactive foster home licenses. As many people know, DCYF took some reductions in funds and staffing in the biennial budget. This is an attempt to kind of right-size the workload for our child welfare licensing division. So it would allow us, if a foster home had gone for a long period without accepting a child, that we could move their status to inactive, and then and we would be writing rules with impacted communities to develop the actual policy for how that would work. We would also, we're seeking to remove the term sex when determining the licensing capacity. We are also seeking to update staffing ratios that are required for crisis residential centers to make it easier for those centers to operate. And we have a component of this removes the requirement for our licensing division to complete health and safety visits and comprehensive reviews at the Washington School for the Deaf. That work is duplicative of what the Washington School for the Deaf has to undergo as a part of their accreditation as a residential school. And so just some ways that we can clean up our statutes to support our licensing process to move more smoothly. Next slide, please. And this is the last piece of agency request legislation. We are seeking, I think, like many other state agencies, to reduce some of the reporting requirements that the department is, legislative reports that we're required to write and produce. So we're seeking to remove some that we think aren't substantive, or there are other ways that the department is already making the data or the information available through dashboards on our website, so we can cut down on workload for our staff and still provide the information that the legislature and the community is seeking from the department by eliminating or modifying some of these reports. And that, I think, is our last slide. Is that right? Okay, great. So I'll just, point to the fact that we have one-pagers on all of, or we will be posting one-pagers on all of our decision packages and agency request legislation to the government affairs page of our website. And all of the DPs are currently posted there, so you don't have to go to the OFM website and try and find them. They're available on the government affairs page of our website. And Allison, I'll turn it back to you to see if we have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. Lots of information, although shorter this year than in years past, given the realities. There was one question that came in about the workload. I clarified that in writing, and I haven't seen any other questions come in. So we did finish a bit early. So I think what we'll do is Brianne and Julie and I will hang out for a few more minutes and wait to see if there's other questions that come in or being typed in. There's a question, are we asking for ECAP expansion as a packet? Good question. No, we do not have an ask around ECAP expansion. You'll actually notice that all of our early learning asks are really around technical needs in the working connections space. We do not have any early learning asks that expand services or increase funding levels. They're really all about sort of that technical space. Part of that is due to the reality that we're in, and we saw significant reduction. We did see reductions last year in the early learning space. The economic reality hasn't changed, and that is where we land. So no, there is not an ask for additional ECAP this year. I will say in the biennial budget, though, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, in the biennial budget, there was an increase in the rate, and there was a reduction in slots that were underfilled. I can't remember if there was an investment in slots in the second year. For some reason, I have in my mind there was 250. Regardless, we did not ask for new slots to be added in this budget cycle. And I'll just, in the context of that question, note that this set of asks feels really different than previous years' sets of asks from DCYF. They're smaller, they're more refined, they're more technical in nature. And that's the agency being responsive to the authorizing environment and the realities. And it feels different. And it's really challenging for all of us inside the agency, and I know that the external partners feel that way as well. Another question, did we ask for TA or training and development for licensed providers? I'm assuming this means childcare, or maybe a different type of licensed provider. I'm not sure. We don't have any asks specific to licensed providers. We do have, yeah, childcare, great. We do have a base budget around childcare training, childcare scholarships that still exists and is intact, that was not eliminated in previous years. So there are resources for professional development, for scholarships, for training for childcare providers, and that work is underway and continues. We did not seek expansion. We have no new funding requests for early learning, which essentially means we are asking to maintain our base levels of funding in early learning. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, is there a reason behind the strategy for staying base level ask? Yeah, as I indicated, great question. As I indicated at the top of this is a supplemental year. It's not a year for new investment, new asks. We're also in a really challenging economic environment where the state is facing a budget deficit potentially, and we don't know the magnitude of that yet. And so it is, it's part of the directions and part of the reality is there isn't new resource, and we have a tough budget climate. And so this was not a year to ask for dramatic increases in funding and in spaces, especially where we have base budgets. And I know that's really challenging to hear, and it's really different than years past. I'm seeing people hop off, and I'm not seeing any more questions come through. Julie and Brienne's contact information is here, and I'm certainly also available for questions. Really appreciate folks attending today. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thursday. Thanks so much.